How do you mourn a man who isn't dead? This question haunted Stephanie Owens every time she drove through the misty Virginia hills to Willow Creek Veterans Home. For 3 long years, she'd watched her father, Captain James Owens, fade into a shell of the vibrant man who'd taught her to ride a bike and slow dance in the kitchen. The decorated Marine now sat motionless in his wheelchair, his brilliant mind lost to severe PTSD after an IED attack in Fallujah. Doctors called it catatonic mutism. Stephanie called it a living death. In her desperation, she'd exhausted every conventional treatment until a colleague mentioned Andrew Tate, a brilliant but controversial trauma specialist from London. When he arrived, he moved with the quiet intensity of a storm about to break. His gaze, the color of a winter sky, swept over the sterile facility with palpable disapproval. "Your father doesn't need gentle comfort, Ms. Owens," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet like shattered glass. "He needs an earthquake. He needs to be shaken until the foundations of his memory crack and the man inside can claw his way out." Stephanie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This man saw her father not as someone to be loved back to life, but as a fortress to be stormed, and she feared his brutal methods would destroy what little remained of the father she adored. Andrew's earthquake protocol began with ruthless efficiency. He replaced the soothing classical music Stephanie always played with jarring battlefield audio, helicopter rotors, distant explosions, and crackling radio static. He positioned himself inches from her father's face, his voice a relentless drill sergeant's bark, demanding answers about Fallujah, about his men, about the attack. The sounds of her father's distressed, guttural moans from down the hall finally broke Stephanie's composure. She found Andrew in the courtyard garden, her voice trembling with a fury born of helplessness. "This isn't treatment, it's torture. You're tearing him apart." Andrew turned on her, his professional mask slipping to reveal something raw and personal. "You're preserving a ghost while the man who saved my life is screaming to get out," he countered, his voice low and vehement. "I was a 19-year-old private, my leg nearly blown off, bleeding out in the dust. Your father carried me on his back for 2 miles through enemy fire. He saved me, then turned around and saved 10 other men before that final IED took everything. I owe him this. I will not let you love him into a quiet grave." The revelation struck Stephanie with physical force. This wasn't a detached specialist. This was a man on a personal crusade of redemption, a man who saw her devotion not as care, but as surrender. The first real crack in her father's armor appeared not through Andrew's aggression, but through a shared, tender memory that Stephanie defiantly introduced. One afternoon, ignoring Andrew's prescribed protocol, she brought her father's old, leather-bound copy of The Old Man and the Sea and began to read the familiar words aloud in his quiet room. Andrew stood in the doorway, a silent, brooding statue of disapproval. But then, as Stephanie paused at a well-worn page, his voice, soft and stripped of its usual edge, finished the next line with a perfect, rhythmic cadence. Her father's head twitched, a tiny, but unmistakably deliberate movement. Andrew's eyes met Stephanie's, wide with shock. "He read it to us?" he whispered, the anger gone, replaced by sheer awe. "In the field hospital, night after night." His voice was the only thing that kept us sane, that kept us focused on something other than the pain and the fear. In that moment, the enemy vanished, replaced by a man who carried his own sacred piece of her father's soul. Later, over bitter coffee in the sterile cafeteria, he confessed the crushing weight of his survivor's guilt, his voice cracking as he described the hero whose voice had been his anchor in hell. Stephanie saw the haunted boy he had been, and the wall between them dissolved into a fragile, aching alliance built on a shared and desperate love for the same broken man. How do you mourn a man who isn't dead? was suddenly brilliantly simple. You don't. You fight for him. And you fight smarter with an ally who knows a different part of the battlefield. Stephanie and Andrew became an unstoppable team, their combined knowledge forming a powerful, dual-keyed lock. She provided the intimate, personal details, the scent of her late mother's Chanel No. 5, the Frank Sinatra song from her parents' wedding, the silly knock-knock jokes he used to tell at the dinner table. Andrew provided the context of the brotherhood, the names and nicknames of the men in his unit, the specific military commands he would have known, the dark humor that kept them going. Together, they created a rich mosaic of a life, carefully piecing together fragments of joy and trauma. One evening, after a session where they played "The Way You Look Tonight," her father's hand trembled on the arm of his wheelchair. His eyes, for one fleeting, heart-stopping second, focused clearly on Stephanie's face, and a single lucid tear traced a path through his stubble. It was just a flicker, but it was everything. Overwhelmed, Stephanie turned and found Andrew already looking at her, his own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, and she finally wept, not from grief, but from a hope so fierce and unexpected it felt like a new kind of pain. In the quiet, hopeful spaces between their intense rehabilitation sessions, a different kind of earthquake began, one that rebuilt instead of shattered. The professional boundary between Stephanie and Andrew melted away, replaced by a magnetic pull that was as profound as it was inevitable. It started with small, unconscious intimacies. His hand gently guiding hers as they looked over old family photos, the way his gaze lingered on her long after she finished speaking, the protective hand he'd place on the small of her back when they walked down the corridor. One rainy night, after a particularly emotional day, they stood together on the porch of the veteran's home, the thunder echoing the turmoil they had weathered. "I came here to save him," Andrew said, his voice rough with an emotion that stole her breath. "I thought I was chasing a ghost, trying to repay a debt. I never expected to find the one person who makes me feel saved." He turned her to face him, his gaze blazing with a raw, vulnerable truth that left no room for doubt. "I love you, Stephanie." His kiss was not one of conquest, but of coming home, a tender, desperate fusion of two wounded hearts finally finding their shelter. For the first time in years, surrounded by the scent of rain and the warmth of his embrace, Stephanie's world felt not just whole, but radiant with possibility. Their hard-won progress faced its greatest threat just as Captain Owens began to consistently recognize Stephanie, his raspy voice whispering "my girl" when she entered the room. The hospital's stern administrator, Dr. Vance, declared Andrew's methods too disruptive and unorthodox, revoking his access privileges after a formal complaint from another patient's family. They were to be separated, the fragile progress halted. But the woman who faced Dr. Vance was no longer the pleading, desperate daughter of 3 months ago. She was a force, forged in battle and backed by a love that felt like armor. With Andrew standing steadfastly beside her, she confronted the entire review board. "You see a disruption," she declared, her voice ringing with authority as she held her father's now steady hand. "We see a miracle in progress." As she spoke, her father, Captain James Owens, slowly lifted his head. His eyes, clear and focused for the first time in years, locked onto Andrew. His voice, raspy from disuse but firm with command, broke the tense silence. "Tate," he said, clear as day. "At ease, son." The room froze. The final, the ultimate trigger wasn't a sound or a smell, but the sight of his lost daughter and the soldier he called brother, standing together, united by their love for him. They hadn't just brought him back. They had become a new, unbreakable family, forged in the fires of shared trauma and triumphant love, whole at last. If the story gripped you, if it made you feel the fire of hate turn into the ache of salvation, then don't let go just yet. More dark romance stories, full of betrayal, obsession, and dangerous love, drop here every week. Hit subscribe now, and let every new story pull you deeper into the shadows where love and ruin walk hand in hand. Until next time, keep listening, keep feeling, and never stop chasing the stories that haunt you.